Tony Greenstein. Victory to the Palestinians.
My name is Steve Zeltzer. I'm with the United Front Committee for a Labour Party. And today we're having a rally at the British Consulate here in San Francisco to protest the trial of Tony Greenstein in England. The British government, the Starmer government, is charging anti-Zionist. They're charging people who are opposed to the genocide with being supporters of Hamas under criminal laws, terrorist laws, and they're trying to jail Tony and other activists, Palestinian activists, who are opposing the genocide in Gaza. And what we believe is that, in fact, these crimes, these war crimes, which are being committed by the Israelis, are fully supported by the British government and also by the US government, which is funding them. And we believe that the American working people need to fight against the attack on people who are fighting Zionism and people who are speaking out and organizing. Tony Greenstein is a journalist, a writer, and he co-founded the Palestine Solidarity Committee in Britain. He also has written extensively about the oppression of Palestinians, and also the role of the Histadrut, which is the Israeli Trade Union Federation. And that federation is actually supported by the AFL-CIO. That federation is a Zionist federation which was set up by the Zionists to enforce apartheid in Israel, to get rid of Arab workers and to replace them with Jewish workers. And at this point today, they are also funding the IDF, funding the cost of the IDF in its oppression and its genocide in Gaza. So that's why they're targeting Tony Greenstein. They want to crush him, and they want to prevent people from speaking out against these crimes of Zionism. So we have some people who are going to make statements. One of them is the Workers' Strike Back Group. They made a statement. They can't be here today, but they say statement of solidarity with Tony Greenstein and against the criminalization of anti-Zionism. Workers' Strike Back stands in unwavering solidarity with Tony Greenstein as he faces a politically motivated trial under the UK's Draconian Terrorism Act on January 31st, 2025. The British government, under Keir Starmer's leadership, has chosen to weaponize the law to silence those who speak out against Israeli apartheid and its ongoing crimes against the Palestinian people. This is not just an attack on Tony Greenstein. It is an attack on freedom of speech, the right to dissent, and the global movement for Palestinian liberation. Tony Greenstein has dedicated his life to exposing the role of Zionism and the oppression of Palestinians. His scholarship and activism are part of a long and proud tradition of international solidarity movement against apartheid from South Africa to Palestine. By putting anti-Zionism on trial, the UK government is making clear they will criminalize legitimate resistance while protecting the real perpetrators of violence, the Israeli state, which continues to bomb, displace, and massacre Palestinians with impunity. We refuse to be intimidated. We reject the false equation of anti-Zionism with terrorism or anti-Semitism. Zionism is a political ideology, not a religion or identity, and opposing it is not a crime. The attempt to silence Tony Greenstein is part of a broader crackdown on those who stand for justice, from students and academics to trade unionists and journalists. The only way Palestine can be liberated is through the power of regular working people like ourselves. We outnumber the elite who have decided to enable and perpetuate this genocide. It starts small by having political conversations with your friends, families, co-workers, and waking them up to our collective power. Not only can we fight for a free Palestine, but we can fight for and win an end to wars and imperial occupations. Free Palestine, Solidarity, Workers' Strike Back, Bay Area chapter. So I have to say that this is not the first time that I and others have been at the British Consulate. We were here for many, many times during the incarceration of a whistleblower, Julian Assange, because the British government had him jailed for speaking truth about the assassinations of the journalists and other people in Iraq. This government, like the American government, is moving towards a fascist dictatorship. They don't want people speaking out, and they don't want people especially exposing the crimes of the British government. Starmer has also got blood on his hands because he is supporting the continued arming of the Zionists, but also he was actively involved in getting rid of politicians who are critical of Israel. And this is nothing new because the Zionists have manipulated, used millions of dollars to go after politicians, and they work with the British government. We believe that the trade union movement in this country needs to demand an end to this trial, this frame-up of Tony Greenstein. The real terrorists are Starmer. The real terrorists are Trump and Biden before him. These are the people that are terrorizing people around the world. These are the people that should be on trial and are committing crimes and genocide. This government, like the Starmer government, refused to use the word genocide, even though they've been charged with genocide by courts, by people around the world. This is genocide and it needs to stop. And this is why we're here today to support Tony Greenstein. So our next speaker is Jeffrey Blankford. Jeffrey is a writer, a photojournalist who has been in Palestine, Lebanon, and also, he was organizing against the bombing of Lebanon in 1982 by the United States, which was dropping 2,000-pound bombs on Lebanon. And when this was raised in the Congress by Pete McCloskey, the Zionists went after Pete McCloskey. It's a crime to use U.S. weapons, cluster bombs and others, but Israel is doing it and getting away with it with the support of the Democratic and Republican Party. He also was the editor of the Labor Bulletin in the Middle East and also co-founder with myself, Middle East Labor Committee. Welcome, Jeff Blankford.
Thank you. Eloquently presented, Steve. The real problem that we're dealing with has a long history. It goes back at least to the first British colonists who arrived on our shores to establish a base for British imperialism. They were challenged by the homegrown imperialists in the American colonies, who immediately established the Monroe Doctrine, U.S. domination over Latin America. Thomas Jefferson was about to send U.S. troops to Haiti to fight with the French against the Haitians, because the French had helped the United States in its so-called revolution, War of Independence. And then we have a situation where the United States expanded over the western United States. So people say, oh, Trump wants Greenland. Well, that's very American. We took half of the United States and made from Mexico in 1846. Nobody talks about that. We took Alaska, we bought Alaska, and in 1893, 40 years before I was born, something like that, we took Hawaii. Nobody says boo. So taking other people's countries is what America has done. We've taken over from the British and the French after World War II. Now, one of the things I've explained, the gentleman walked by here, is that the Zionists had a position which most Jews don't know about, and certainly the public doesn't know about, is in the United States with Ben Gurion and in Great Britain, Chaim Weizmann, their position was the Jews should not be rescued unless they go to Palestine. That was the position of the Zionists. We do not want the Jews to be sent to other countries, because the dream, as Ben Gurion wrote to his son, the dream of Zionism would be dead. So they were openly ready to sacrifice the Jews of Europe. In this country, it was quite public. A supporter of the Irgun, which was the only Zionist organization that actually supported rescuing the Jews, it was a right-wing and became a terrorist organization. But the Irgun tried to hold a rally, a big rally in New York at Madison Square Garden, to alert the world, the United States, to the Holocaust, what was going on. And the Zionist mainstream tried to stop it, to sacrifice, do everything they possibly could to keep that event from happening. Meanwhile, Chaim Weizmann did the same thing by making threats against the British government if they would do anything to rescue Jews. And so what happened is the Zionist position was the more Jews who were killed by the Nazis, the better chance it is that we will get Palestine. And that's how it worked out. And if you ask the majority of Israelis today, and I've been there, if you ask them, was it worth it, they would say yes. Because they treated the Holocaust survivors who came there like they were germs. For example, in the streets of Tel Aviv, when I was there in 1983 in Tel Aviv, I saw Holocaust survivors begging with tin cups in Tel Aviv and threadbare clothes, and you knew what they were. And every so often, Holocaust survivors have made statements supporting the Palestinians. They're in the Israeli press, but the Zionists control the U.S. media totally and completely. And so you don't see any of those stories, but I saw them when I was in Israel in '83 and also 2004. They simply don't want Americans and the world to know that the Holocaust survivors in Israel, many of them support the Palestinians and say, this is long before October 7th, the Palestinians are being treated like they were before they were put in the concentration camps. And all this is part of a history that's totally unknown here, but the Israelis know it. It's published in Haaretz, the paper, but also the other Jewish papers in Israel, and published in Hebrew. They know these facts, and yet, when it comes to supporting what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank, they say thumbs down like Caesar did. And in America, the Philadelphia Jewish Exponent, which is a newspaper for Philadelphia Jews, takes polls. Their last poll was 85% of the Jews of Philadelphia, organized Jews, which is a minority, but still it's the organized Jews, 85% support the genocide, support the Israel operations in Gaza. And no protests by them, and not a word of sympathy. And I'm a journalist, and I subscribe to the Jewish press in America, and also the Israeli press in English. And I've yet to see a single word of empathy for the Palestinians in Gaza from any Jewish organization or official in the United States. Not a single word. They are the victims of Palestinian terror. And what you see, comparing them to the Nazis, they're clearly worse, because Germans were taken into the German army, and there's no way they could refuse. I mean, I was in Cassino in Italy 55 years ago, 6 years ago, and there were 10,000 German soldiers, many of them teenagers, buried 3 to a grave with names named after German philosophers and poets and musicians and so on. They didn't go there to fight Jews. They didn't go there. This was a Nazi operation, but Israel is a people's army. They're proud to have a people's army. Men and women alike are in the people's army, and they can refuse and not get penalized. Many of them have actually left the country. I had a cousin who left the country a long time ago and came here because he didn't want to serve in the military. So they're going all over Europe. This is why they're trying to get the religious Jews into the army. Ben-Gurion made a promise that they would support Israel at the very beginning. They would get welfare and not have to serve in the army, because before Israel, all the religious Jewish organizations were anti-Zionist, said it would be the worst thing to happen to the Jews. But they were bought off. Simple as that. And today, you see them when I was there, like 2004, sitting in a cafe in the old city of Jerusalem. Here comes, after prayers, like a marching army of religious Jews, like conquering army, just with insulting the Palestinians. I mean, I've never seen a people as sadistic as those I saw in Israel. I mean, it wasn't that they're racist, but they're proudly sadistic. Antonio! I haven't seen him. So this was, today, it's interesting. When I was there in 1983, I interviewed Israeli soldiers who refused to fight in Lebanon. And the person who inspired them was a revered Jewish scholar, Orthodox Jewish scholar named Joshua Leibowitz. And Leibowitz made a statement in 1967 that if Israel did not immediately get out of the West Bank and Gaza and the Golan Heights, they would become like Nazis. And his predictions turned out to be completely true, except they're worse, because they know what's going on, and they participate in it. You have Israeli soldiers targeting Palestinian children. Before, when they had a march to Gaza, before this, they would shoot their legs. They just literally tried to cripple them, to maim them. And then when they destroyed their universities, their schools, They did that in Lebanon. They want to destroy every vestige of the Palestinians. My position is the reverse. For me, I was there in Lebanon under their occupation. The way they treated the Lebanese was absolutely unforgivable. And you had Lebanese who actually supported Israel when they invaded Lebanon because they didn't want the PLO fighting on their territory, because the Israelis would then send shelling into the Shia villages when the Palestinians would attack them. So the Israelis started treating the Shia just like they treated the Palestinians, because their anti-Arab positions are instilled in them from birth by their mothers, the hatred of Arabs. And to me, I was born in 1941, just 7 years after Hitler came into power. The head of the Haganah stayed at our house. The first Israeli ambassador to the UN stayed at our house. I had a chance, and my parents had a chance, to see what these people were about. And then we had friends who went to live in Israel very early on, and when they saw the Palestinians being treated like being submitted to pogroms, when an Israeli Palestinian who had left his home had been forced out of his home, when he or the Palestinians would launch an attack against Israel, what would happen is the Palestinians would be subjected to what my parents' friends called pogroms, just like happened to the Jews in Europe. And so this is how I came to be an anti-Zionist. Now in Britain today, they don't have freedom of speech. You get arrested for saying you support Hamas. You come up with a little sign that says, I support Hamas, you're arrested. Tell Tony Greenstein, they kind of trapped him into a telephone call about supporting the Palestinians. They wanted to make sure he said, I support Hamas. I actually don't support any group. I support the Palestinians in total, and anything they do by any means necessary to liberate their land after 75 years, I say right on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. And when you look at Starmer and the real gangsters, the crooks that are running the British government, how did Starmer get in power? How did he come to power in Britain, in the United Kingdom? And one of the ways he did it was to organize with the Zionists in Britain to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. There was a campaign that Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite because he supported the right of the Palestinians. That's why he was an anti-Semite. And this Starmer and these Zionists had a witch hunt against Jeremy Corbyn. Every day they had a witch hunt against Jeremy Corbyn. They lied, they slandered him. And Jerry Corbyn, unfortunately, did not fight them. He didn't call them out. He didn't say the Zionists are doing this. He didn't say the real criminals are the supporters of Zionism, the supporters of genocide. He refused to do that because Jeremy Corbyn is a social democrat. Jeremy Corbyn does not want to mobilize the working class. The British workers should have been mobilized against these Zionist attacks. They should have mobilized to shut down arms from UK to Israel. In the United States, the same thing. The AFL-CIO leadership is silent about the genocide. They support Israel. They call themselves Zionist, as Kamala Harris did and Biden did. The AFL-CIO leadership say they are Zionist. That's what they say. They believe in Zionism. That's racism. That's against the interests of the working class here and the working class in Palestine. So we have to say that we need a working class leadership. We need a workers' party and a workers' government that's going to represent workers in Palestine and workers in the United States. Right now, you have a fascist government in the United States that's disregarding the Constitution, that's threatening to raid people, mass deportations. What the hell are the Democrats doing about it? Oh, they're going to go to court. They're going to go to the Supreme Court. They'll get justice in the Supreme Court like hell. Like hell. We need in this country a mass working class movement. We need a general strike against the threat of dictatorship. This government is a fascist government. This government is preparing for a full dictatorship, and they're turning the government agencies like the FBI into agents to weaponize and go against leftist, working class immigrants and minorities. They also say, like the Zionists say, that Panama belongs to the United States. Greenland should belong to the United States. U.S. imperialism now, it says that they want to take over these countries. It's not new, as our speakers have said before. The United States invaded Hawaii. The United States invaded Guam in 1889. They invaded the Philippines to bring democracy. Do people remember that? The United States was going to bring democracy to the Philippines. Well, even Mark Twain was against that. There was the Anti-Imperialist League. So this idea that the United States government and the capitalists here want democracy is ludicrous. In fact, the capitalists in this country are supporting Trump. They're giving him money. The TV stations, all the capitalists are rallying behind Trump. Why is that? Because their primary thing is making money and profits. And if it's over the bodies of working people around the world, that's fine, as long as they can make money. So today, we're saying in front of the British Consulate, we support Tony Greenstein. We're opposed to any of these prosecutions of anti-Zionists and people who are against the genocide. We're saying the real criminals here at the British government and Starmer and the U.S. government, they are the ones that should be in jail. They should be in prison for the crimes they've conducted. They're the real criminals. This is the fact, and this is the reality. And we're here to speak out and say, Tony, you're not alone. Your brothers and sisters who are fighting to tell the truth about Zionism, about the genocide, have support in the United States. And we are going to continue to organize that fight. Next week, we're organizing a demonstration at ICE against the mass deportations. The attack by this racist Trump and his government is an attack on the entire working class. It's not just on immigrants. In fact, I just read that they want to use a law against Native Americans being citizens to get rid of their citizenship. So here you have the capitalist government saying Native Americans can't be citizens of the United States. This is a reactionary, counter-revolutionary government, and we in the United States have to organize against this. Our next speaker is going to be Ricardo Ortiz. He's a labor researcher. He's a member of the DSA and has been fighting for the working class. He's from Puerto Rico and has been fighting against the colonization of Puerto Rico. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you, Steve. As previous speakers have said, the UK is an imperialist country. It has multinational corporations exploiting cheap labor around the world. Actually, among the principal financial imperialist banking institutions of the world, there is Barclays Bank, the Bank of London, and all these financial monopoly corporations under British flag that are exploiting cheap labor in Africa and other places. And still the United Kingdom has colonies. It has colonies in the Caribbean, the British, so-called British Virgin Islands. It has military bases around the world, such as in Kenya, in Belize, and in many other places. The British intelligence services collaborate closely with the Yankee imperialists at CIA. One example of that is that during the strike that took place in the mines in the 80s, the MI6, which is the British CIA, asked the CIA to investigate if labor leaders had accounts outside the UK. So, you know, that's the close collaboration. The Special Air Service, which is the British Special Forces, those close collaboration with the American military special forces. By the way, the American Special Forces, the Green Berets, they were formed under the training and the inspiration of the British SAA murderers. So we got established what the UK to start is. It's a country that has nuclear weapons. It's a complete rapist, imperialist country. And now let's get to the point of the journalist Tony Greenstein being persecuted by the UK. This is a part of an international campaign led by the imperialist powers and reactionary governments to prosecute any sympathizer or active spokesperson for the Palestinian cause. And I will give you some examples. In Argentina, at this moment, there is a reactionary neoliberal government, lucky of the US and the European Union, called Javier Milei. And during the Peronist previous government, a couple of communists from Trotsky's tendencies have been indicted. One of them is Congresswoman Vanina Biasi from the Partido Obrero, from the Workers' Party. She was indicted because she said that Israel is a genocidal state that was committing genocide against the Palestinians. So the Argentinian Ministry of Justice immediately filed charges of hate crimes against this socialist member of Congress. She didn't say any anti-Semite statement. She only condemned the state of Israel. Alejandro Bolart, which is a leader of the Marxist Trotsky's movement of socialist workers, Movimiento Socialista de los Trabajadores, was indicted with similar charges because he publicly went and criticized Israel. He was indicted. District Federal Court find him not guilty of the charges, and then the Milei government appealed that sentence and restated these charges. So these two comrades in Argentina, Marxists, are under attack. That we have to defend these comrades actively, just like we are defending Tony Greenstein. So why is this concerted effort from imperialist countries to neocolonial stooge governments? It is because Israel is the most loyal servant in the Middle East to the interests of world imperialism. Israel is the carrier. You can compare it with a battle carrier of Yankee, British, German, French imperialists in the Middle East at this moment. Many world powers arm and equip the Israeli government, from American tanks to Leopard 2 German tanks to French equipment. Israel the Israeli government is armed to the teeth. And with these weapons supplied by world imperialism, they are committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. And we got to rise up, and we got to come to actions like this to condemn and expose the role of U.S. imperialism and the role of their accomplice in the Middle East, the State of Israel. So work in your trade unions, in any organization that you belong, in any committee where you would be, for, number one, the establishment of a federation, a socialist federation of the Middle East. Israel must become a secular socialist worker state for everybody. And here in the belly of the beast, we got to fight, because this repressive government, this reactionary government is out there with all these reactionaries in power trying to prosecute people. But this is not only the Republican Party. We got to go look back in history and look during McCarthyism. It started in the early 50s under the Truman administration. And people were indicted under the Smith Act, which was signed into law in 1940 when the hero of the liberals, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was in office. And who were indicted by these laws were not fascists, were members of the then Marxist Socialist Workers' Party, and later on the members of the Communist Party along with the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. So that happened under the Democratic Party administration. In 1968, the so-called Omnibus and Safe Streets Acts was signed into law by LBJ, who was spying everybody in the anti-war movement. They killed Fred Hampton. They did all sorts of things against the opposition to the Vietnam War. So the Democratic Party is a party also of war, of imperialism. It's the oldest capitalist imperialist party in the world, believe it or not. So let's get rid of the capitalist system right here and worldwide. Down with the Democrats, which are the graveyard of the social movements. We got to build a workers' party to get rid of all injustice and exploitation. Thank you.
Before our next speaker, I wanted to talk a bit about who are the anti-Semites? Who are the anti-Semites? Because the anti-Semites, they say, are Tony Greenstein and many, many Jews who are anti-Zionist. They're calling them the anti-Semites. But the reality is, Zionism and the founders of Israel work with the Nazis. They work with the Nazi Party. They collaborated with the Nazi Party, and they invited Adolf Eichmann to Palestine to get support of the Nazis for the establishment of a Jewish state. They made a medal to honor this work. The Nazis did. So when we talk about the Zionists fighting anti-Semitism, that is a fraud. That's a scam. The Zionists actually have the same ideology as the Nazis. That's why they work with them. They have a racist ideology that only Jews belong in Palestine, in Israel. It's their land, and that land is all over the place. Lebanon, Jordan, that land belongs to that whole area belongs to the Zionists. This reactionary ideology is continued because the United States worked with the Histadrut. They work with the Zionists for this occupation, and the Zionists worked around the world in arming Guatemala fascist forces, and arming Chile, and supporting coups. So this Zionist imperialist role has to be exposed, and the fact of the matter is, fascism and Zionism are equal. They have an equality, and Starmer is representing these people. Starmer and the British government are representing the support of Zionism, the support of genocide. It has to stop. We are here today to say to Tony Greenstein, keep up your fight, we defend you. Our next speaker is a sister from the Spartacus League.
I'm with the Partisan Defense Committee, supported by the Spartacus League. The Partisan Defense Committee joins the demand of this rally to drop the charges, hands off the courageous anti-fascist and British Free Palestine advocate Tony Greenstein. The Starmer Labour regime is threatening Greenstein with a possible 14-year sentence under Britain's notorious Terrorism Act for inviting quote-unquote support for a proscribed organization. The alleged speech crime, a year-old tweet that proclaimed, quote, "I support Hamas against the Israeli army," end quote. Here in the U.S., picking up where the Biden administration left off, Trump is upping the ante, threatening to deport foreign-born campus pro-Palestinian protesters. The campaign to defend the advocates of a free Palestine deserves the broadest and most powerful support. Make their defense and their cause that of the international working class, especially here in the U.S., whose imperialist rulers are the main enablers of the Zionist genocide and terror against the Palestinians. Hands off Tony Greenstein, forward to a red and free Palestine. Thank you.
Free Tony Greenstein.
Hands off Tony.
Victory to the Palestinians!
Victory to the Palestinians!
Victory to the Palestinians!
Victory to the Palestinians!